Thanks for joining us today. We are going to be having a conversation with author Claire Cain. Claire is going to kick us off by reading a little from her first book titled Where You Go.
So this is Where You Go. And this little snippet that I'm going to read is from a part of the book where Megan, who is a army wife in the love interests unit, is talking to Alex, the heroine, and they're talking about, how do you know it's worth it to sacrifice part of what you want or who you are and be with Luke, the guy in the military, or any given, insert romantic soldier
Sure.
interest person. So this is Megan speaking to Alex. It's not that it's not worth it. I wouldn't trade my life, this military life, for anything. I wouldn't trade it for the career of my dreams. I wouldn't trade it for a house near my folks and my grandparents and free babysitting and great school systems. I wouldn't trade it for a safe job for James and a predictable future for our family. I love the adventure and the challenge of moving. I love the pride I feel in my husband's job, and honestly, the pride I feel in myself and my kids for all the crap we deal with and how we figure out how to make the most of every situation. I love the hell out of my army wife friends, and in so many ways, they're closer than family. But that doesn't mean that sometimes what I've given up doesn't feel like a loss, like something I need to mourn now and then, even when I know what a beautiful life this is. Her voice was thick, and I looked over and saw the sincerity written on her face. She seemed desperate for me to understand her, but she wasn't warning me away from Luke. We sat quietly for 2 rounds, and then she turned to me and said, I guess I would say to you that the question isn't whether you are strong enough for Army life. No one knows that because you don't get strong enough for it until you're in it. It's kind of like having a baby. You're never actually prepared, no matter how many times you babysit or helped with a sibling or how many books you read. You just do it. And then you figure it out and you keep doing it because it's real life and there's no other choice. The real question is, what aren't you willing to give up for Luke? We'll stop there.
So thank you, Claire, for reading that. For those just joining us, this is Claire Cain, and she's joining us today as part of our Spotlight series. And so we're going to talk a little bit about her and her path as an author. So I'll give her a moment to let her introduce herself.
Sure. I'm Claire Cain. I have been married for 11 years to my husband, who I've known for coming up on 20 years. We go way back.
Right.
Born and raised in Utah, and I went to school in New York City, and then I got hitched my wagon to the Army life. I have 2 young children, 6 and 4, and until last spring, I was an English teacher for a university in Tennessee. So
Oh,
I have abandoned my career for yet another career,
for another career.
as we can all probably relate to. So, so
Absolutely.
that's me.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Claire, the author. What led you down that road? I'd read something about it, kind of starting out really early for you in terms of your love of writing. To tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I kept a journal religiously from about 7. My sister gave me my first journal. My mom went on a big, like, 2 or 3 week trip for something, and so in a cosmic fated moment, my sister gave me the journal, and so all of my very high emotions as a 7-year-old, which nothing has changed, were poured into this journal. So I journaled probably pretty much daily right up until things got interesting in my life, like during college, and then I
Right.
quit. So I was always writing that way, and then in the flare of hormonal teendom, I discovered boy bands and started writing boy band fan fiction, which still brings embarrassment to my life. But on my Facebook page, I do every once in a while read a snippet of those very touching fan fiction. So that's where I started really writing stories, and then I in high school I did a lot of writing, and then I was also sort of choir and musical theater, which, looking back, I think what I loved about that was the ability to tell a story.
Right.
And
Right.
in college I also part of my major was writing. I did kind of a weird mishmashy job of my major. So part of it was writing, and then part of it was totally unrelating to writing. And then I got my master's in creative writing, but then started teaching and didn't write creatively at all other than blogging. I did blog every single day of one of my husband's deployments, which was an exercise in discipline, really, more than anything. And
right.
then
In routine.
And that's really the last, yes, exactly. So, and that was, 8 years ago now that I did that. So I haven't, all this time I've just been focused on the teaching element, which is very different because I haven't been teaching creative writing. So, but I probably, since I was aware that it was a thing you could do, have wanted to write a book.
Yeah.
And have finally just in the last probably 2 years thought, oh, I could actually do that. And then did. So that's
right. Imagine that. Right. Yeah. Well, and speaking of your books and your characters, like how much of kind of who you are as a military spouse and the path that you and your husband and your family have walked in this life is mirrored in your characters and in some of the stories that you tell there?
I think a fair amount. I mean, anyone who knows me pretty well, when they read this first book, everyone says, oh, you are Alex. That's the heroine. And I beg to differ there because she's pretty different from me in some ways. But I think what they're picking up on is I'm the storyteller. So that's my tone of voice. I think people will see that in the second book when it's a totally different person. But I also share a lot in common with Ellie, the heroine of the second book. So in terms of military trajectory, though, our paths are very different. And that's something that was interesting to me because I graduated college and then 3 months later, my husband commissioned and we got married all in a week. So I knew from the very beginning what was coming. And I know that's different than your story and different than my story, who go and they have a career and they have this established life, or they have a spouse for however long who then all of a sudden feels the call to the military.
Yeah,
so
sure.
You creatures are very fascinating to me because I think that's such a challenge. And I think I face my own challenges not having created my own career and then having to transition away from it. I've always had to kind of cobble it together, which in some ways is great and in some ways is maddening. I'm glad it got me to this place. But so with Alex, what I was thinking about was all my dear friends who sort of unsuspectingly are foolish enough to fall in love with somebody in the military at a later point and sort of have to figure out, well, how do I do this now?
Right.
How do I be me and have all the things that sort of make me and then also love this person and join up with them in a situation where their career is going to determine most things about how we live.
Right.
So that's sort of what I was thinking of. But a lot of Alex's sentiment and observations about, like, she goes to a military ball and that's kind of a big moment for her in terms of
for all of us, right?
Yes, exactly. Your first ball is kind of magical.
Right, it's a big deal. It's totally a big deal.
Yeah, fraught with sweaty polyester. But some of her impressions are my impressions, and some of Luke, the hero's perspectives, are my own perspectives, and and then there are sort of seasoned Army spouses whose perspectives come through in the book, and those are mine too.
Right, right.
Yeah, so it's all my ideas.
All of it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not all me, but there are things I've thought, or as I think about the way we as spouses manage things, they're how I think a lot of it.
Do you find that as you sort of come upon situations in this life that you kind of put in the back of your mind, oh, that's a really important topic. At some point, I really want a character that can tell that story. Like, do you kind of file those things away as situations come up and they don't fit the current book that you're writing, but you want them to fit a future book?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a running list of things to cover, and I hopefully will start another series that's about already married military couples, just because I've written these books, which is sort of about the falling in love with a soldier, I've realized there are so many stories that I can't tell because these women aren't in it yet. You know, they don't know about a PCS. They don't know about
Right.
living bonus or managing deers or TRICARE or what, you know, just all of these things that are sort of unique and I think kind of fascinating to people on the outside, or maybe not at all fascinating because they don't know about them. But those are unique, you know, aside from the obvious huge separations for TDYs or deployments, things that we deal with that are sort of rife for me to mine as a storyteller. And also
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because that's my story in many ways. One of my
Right.
stories.
Sure. Your friend's
Those are
story.
stories I want to read. So yes, I do keep a running list. Basically, anytime my husband's in his blues, I'm like, I need to get these in there. I'm a
I think
sucker for a man in the uniform.
I
you
know, right? I know. I think it's so cool though. One of the things I love about what you're doing is it is kind of this twofold thing, right? It's you building this career of your own as a writer and an author, and yet it's also this other piece of being able to help people through the perspectives that your characters have and what they see and what they learn and how they sort of manage some of the challenges. So I love that it has this kind of two-pronged approach in terms of its impact. I think that's super cool. I love it.
That's ideal. Yes.
Yeah, right. In a perfect world, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about kind of the shift from just having the stories and wanting to be the storyteller to really wanting to put them out in front of someone and getting kind of like beyond the journal mode, right?
Yeah.
So what was the point at which you said, okay, I really think I can, and I want to put these out into the world, and I want people to pay for them, and I want it to be a business, and I want to be an entrepreneur. And, you know, do you see yourself that way? And how did that sort of step come about for you?
Well, the writing thing, I mean, I don't think I had ever written more than probably whatever my thesis was for my master's, which was nowhere near novel length. So there was part of me that was sort of like, I wonder if I could write a book, you know, like that's just so much more than anything you write if you're not writing a book. That sounds so
Right.
obvious. Sit down to write 80,000 words or 100,000 words. It's a
Blows my
lot.
mind.
It blew my mind too. I literally started having like heart palpitations when I got to 50,000 words with the first book. I was like, this is gonna, like, my computer is gonna explode. It can't
Right.
handle it. But so there was part of me that sort of, I am not at all an impulsive person, but with stuff like this, especially when it comes to kind of creating my own space, I guess I kind of get a little, go back to Virginia Woolf and kind of creating my own space as a woman, having a room of my own. My husband's very good at supporting me because he knows that I turn into a crazy person if I don't have my own thing.
Right.
And also I think on a, you know, more valuable level, believes that I have something to contribute, and
Sure.
has been very generous to support my crazy ventures all along. But so part of it was just having his support to say, yeah, you should do that. Part of it was having read a crush of romance novels that were terrible, and most are really good, but sort of reading, I think I read like 3 or 4 that were just really bad, like just genuinely bad. I don't remember them at this point. And just thinking, these people, this book is out there, and I, like a fool, paid money for this. So there was part of that sort of indignant as a consumer, thinking like, I can do better than this, you know, which is foolish arrogance. I mean, that's a horrible thing to say, and I respect anyone who cranks out a book of whatever quality. But that was sort of an awakening for me to be like, I'm a capable writer, and I've always wanted to write a book. And I kind of settled into embracing romance as a genre because I was enjoying it so much as a reader, and decided that, sort of along with that, realizing that no one was telling the kind of stories I wanted to read, or at least I wasn't finding many of them. And so that sort of emboldened me to say, oh, maybe I have a voice here that could be interesting. And also, I might actually have a story to tell, because that's always kind of stopped me. I can't imagine actually telling a story over the course of a novel length. And now I've realized that that's really not the hard part.
Right.
The hard part is editing and then marketing.
Right.
So that goes into the entrepreneur side, where I have really resisted even thinking of myself that way, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like I have that sort of hyper energy to like create things. And you read like a book by any of these really motivational people, or you hear them speak and you're sort of like, I don't have that. I don't think I have that, but I
Mm-hmm.
do. It's just a different kind of thing. So
Sure.
in the particularly indie author community, they call it the authorpreneur, which is kind of annoying, but it makes sense, because no matter how you're published, especially if you don't come at it like Rachel Hollis with a huge
Sure.
platform already, you're
Yeah.
not going to make much money, and you're responsible for marketing. So
Right.
I think just over the last year, I wrote the book and then sort of was looking into, okay, how do I get it out there? And recognizing that no matter how it gets out there, it's on me to get it in front of people.
Mm.
I'm sort of embracing the fact that this is a multifaceted job, and that if I want to have longevity and keep writing books, the thing I love most, I need to embrace and figure out how to enjoy the parts that are intimidating to me, like marketing, like managing social media.
Right.
And so my goal for this next year is to sort of, along with all the writing goals, is to just stop limiting myself on the things that I don't think I can do, and just go for it and just have fun learning something new. So sorry, that was really long-winded.
No, like I love all of it because I am right there with you. So as we talk about you, choosing this path of being an author and kind of really, committing to walking down that, how much of that, I guess your interest, if you will, in that, and your willingness to go down that road was driven by kind of the mobility of it, the kind of the ease of it as a career for, for a military spouse who often, as we know, is going to, is potentially going to struggle with finding a career that is easily mobile. Was being an author something that, oh, this is great too, because it allows me to move it? Or was that sort of a just icing on the cake? I mean, did it play much into the decision for you to really commit to putting a book out?
I think it probably not, in that I think the largest factor was that pushed me to finally really make a big change and quit teaching, was sort of my frustration with the mobility and my teaching job, for various reasons. But in a way, I'm glad for that, because I don't know that if I was in a place with stability and had a job, that I would have been brave enough to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to jump, And
Mm-hmm.
so in a way, I feel like kind of the forced frustration of trying to make this other career work, which, I loved, and I hope I'll teach again in some capacity, but sort of had topped out for me, because you can't be tenure track when you don't put your feet on the ground of a camp.
Right.
Doesn't
Yeah.
work very well.
No.
Um, so I think that sort of that, and a lot of other factors, but I will say that I do feel very fortunate that my interest and my sort of passions are in the realm of being flexible. I really feel
Mhm.
for women who do need to be in one place for an extended time and build their, social capital or whatever it is in their field. So I'm glad it's flexible and can go with me. And I'll say that as we most likely face down another move in less than 6 months, we just got here and we're going to go
Right.
again. I think I have, yeah, exactly, but I'm ready for it. I think I feel with this move more than any other so far, um, less anxiety about how I will fit my
Mm.
goals into where we're going to live, because
Oh,
it
that's
really,
really interesting.
yeah. So I'm kind of relishing that with this, because every
Yeah.
place we've gone, I've looked at schools, where I would teach. I've looked at, just whatever random teaching opportunities. In Germany, I taught at the education center, which was weird and cool, but not right. So
Yeah.
there's a freedom in sort of being like, yeah, I just need my computer and like a place to sit on that for hours on end, and I'm good.
Right.
And some amount of childcare, but praise be, my son will be in kindergarten, so even that is like a little bit easier. I don't have to freak out about childcare. So I feel like I'm, you know, the stars are aligning in this regard.
Right. No, that's an interesting kind of unexpected, impact of the choice that you made, which is that's really fascinating. Cause I wouldn't have thought of that, but I could see it, that it takes all those questions that often cause us so much stress as we move off the table.
Yeah.
And you can focus on other things. I'm sure there'll be other things to stress about because that's what we do, but
Yeah.
well, and you touched on it a little bit, but one of the things I was curious about is kind of if you think about what you've learned as a military spouse and sort of the skills that you've picked up along the way in that role, what is one of those or one of those two skills that you feel like really has helped you succeed in what you're doing now? And you mentioned kind of being willing to take that leap. Is there anything else that comes to mind besides that?
In terms of skills, probably feeling a little bit like a jack of all trades, master of none, and being okay with that.
Yeah.
Embracing that I am not an expert at anything, but I'm pretty good at like a lot of random stuff, and that's okay.
Right.
And now sort of trying to embrace how those things might come together to, help me with things like marketing, or I think
Right.
sometimes, having to reinvent yourself, or not so much reinvent yourself, but reintroduce yourself, get to know people quickly and things like that. For me, have stripped away some of my resistance to trying new things and failing. Not that I'm not afraid of failure, but I think it does sort of give me the boldness to just be like, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. And if it's terrible, I have lots of really sweet friends who will hold my hand while I cry.
I know.
So, and I think the big part for me, which would be high up on my list of things I value most about this lifestyle, is the support system. Because I, have so many kind friends who have, supported me in the process of writing and encouraged me to keep going. And then as the books come out, tried to spread the word about it and give me opportunities like this and things like that. So I think that is one of the beauties of this life, that it's different outside of the military. And I'm thankful for that, that resource and gift,
Sure. No, for sure. Good. Okay. So along kind of we're almost done, but finishing up with kind of the military piece and the learnings, if there's someone out there who kind of sort of like you has always really loved writing and has thought about it, but just isn't quite sure how and when and where to take that leap, what would be your best advice to someone who is, teetering on starting to carve that path for themselves?
My first advice comes both as now a published author, which sounds fancy but isn't really that fancy, but also as a former writing coach and as a teacher of students who have to write a lot. And that is sit down and write. Because you can't be an author unless you have something to publish.
Right.
So that's the first advice. Just write, do it. Like, you don't do it when you feel like it. You have to sit down and do it all the time. Even when you're sick, even when you're sad, even when you have cramps, even when you're in the middle of a PCS.
Right.
So that's one thing. If you're serious about it, you got to sit down, put your butt in the seat, put your fingers to the keyboard and write. The other thing would be send me a message. I'd love to chat with you because I get it. And third would be, don't be afraid or count yourself out because of any given thing. I think this has been sort of a family theme in the last little while, and I guess it's sort of always been my approach, but I think a lot of times, particularly as women, we excuse ourselves from a lot of opportunities or passions or callings even because we assume that XYZ things in our lives or our personalities are the reason why it couldn't work for us. It won't, I have this and this, whatever. And it's not always the right time. It doesn't have to happen right now. I guess that's another piece of that. But being willing to say, why not me? There's something to that. And being willing to say, it's okay if I try and fail. That's terrifying for a lot of us, but you have to try. And if you're feeling that kind of gut crush or whatever, I know that's a horrible phrase, but
no, I know, like
you're feeling, the stirring in your spirit, then you, you go for it. You know,
Right.
like don't count yourself out because you're an army wife, because you're a mom, because you're exhausted, because you're totally exhausted if you're any one of those things. And if that's not going to go away, so you might as well do something awesome in the midst of it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think I think you make a really good point, which is that, sometimes those voices, if you will, in the back of our head that say, well, I could do that too, or maybe I could do that too. I think it is easy for us to use the life around us as a reason why maybe those things just, they won't work. And to your point, sometimes it's not the right time and sometimes they won't work in that particular moment. But when that voice doesn't go away, it is definitely something that is worth looking into, even if it's scary,
Yes.
because the really good stuff often comes out of the kind of scary stuff. Well, that is kind of all that I had. I love talking with you, and I love getting your perspective on what this has looked like for you. Go ahead and tell everyone how they can find you, find your books, find what you're up to latest. We'd love to know.
Okay. The best place to find me is clairecainwriter.com. And from there you can find me on all other platforms and everything, but I'm Claire Cain Writer on Facebook. I'm Claire Cain Writer on Instagram. I am Claire Cain on Twitter because Twitter is too long. And if you search Claire Cain or where you go in Amazon, you'll find my book. And the second book comes out here in a little bit, so there's more fun to come.
There's more fun. And so the first one was Where You Go, and the second one titled is
As You Are.
As You Are.
3 words.
Is that the theme for all 4? There's 3 words to each title.
I don't have the titles for the third and fourth book, but it's probably, I'm stuck with that because I'm a pretty linear thinker in that
right,
regard,
you'll have to back into that now.
Yeah.
I love it. Good. Well, thank you for joining us. Good luck to you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.